bees, grasshoppers leading the way, butterflies. It's like chanting in a shrine hall. Little calf. You know the way to Cold Mountain?
I came once to sit on Cold Mountain and lingered here for 30 years.
Nobody knows his real name. Cold Mountain was his real name. He just showed up one day and started writing poems.
Morning sun pops through the jaws of blue peaks. White clouds are washed in the green pond. Who would have thought I would ever leave the dusty world and come bounding up the southern slope of Cold Mountain?
The path to Han Shan's place is laughable. A path, but no sign of cart or horse. Converging gorges, hard to trace their twists. Jumbled cliffs, unbelievably rugged. 1,000 grasses bend with the dew. A hill of pines hums in the wind. And now I've lost the shortcut home. Body asking shadow, how do you keep up?
Hello!
你好。
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 Well, here we are in China, as you can hear. Land of 1.5 billion people. Finding stillness in China is really rare. But monasteries are a good place to begin, you'd think. Han Shan lived here about 1,200 years ago.
They say he was a poor man, a crazy character.
Here we sit, a bunch of poor scholars ravaged by extremes of hunger and cold. Out of work, our only joy is poetry. Scribble, scribble, we wear out our brains. Who will read the works of such men? On that point, you can save your sighs. We could inscribe our poems on biscuits, and homeless dogs wouldn't deign to nibble.
The Buddhists say he was a Buddhist. The Taoists say he was a Taoist. But nobody claimed him while he was alive. He was always poking fun at people, trying to get them to be better.
人生再沉蒙，恰是盆中虫。终日行绕绕，不离其盆中。神仙不可比，烦恼既无穷。岁月如流水，须臾作老翁。
Somebody collected his poems after he disappeared. He left about 300 that they were able to collect.
And of course, a great deal of controversy as to whether they all date from the same time or same person.
Well, Lu Chiuyin, a provincial governor, left a text behind that may be real, may be legendary, may be invented, but it purports to tell of a visit to a person known as Han Shan. He lived alone 70 li west of the Tangxing district of Tiantai at a place called Cold Mountain. He often went down to the Guoqing Temple,
One of the great monasteries of the Tang Dynasty, and this is where he most likely spent his winters. He was good friends with an older monk named Fungan, or Big Stick, and Pickup, Sure Duh, who worked in the kitchen and saved leftovers for old Cold Mountain, who may have lived here in the monastery or lived just outside its walls. Nobody knows it.
Han Shan would come, walking the long veranda, calling and shouting happily, talking and laughing to himself.
People in the West like Cold Mountain because she was one of the first poets to use colloquial language.
My mother and father left me a good living. I need not envy the fields of other men. Clack, clack goes my wife at her loom. Jabber, jabber goes my son at play. Chin in hand, I listen to the singing birds. Clapping hands, I urge on the swirling petals. Who comes to commend me on my way of life? Well, a woodcutter sometimes passes by.
Westerners of the 60s and 70s hippies, the Back to Earth movement, venerated that sort of figure. And of course he was discovered by some people who were key elements in that movement, Gary Snyder, Jack Kerouac.
The name that my Zen master gave me are two characters from a Han Shan poem, one that I had translated. And it means literally, listen to the wind. The smell and the feel of the High Sierra backcountry was very much in my mind when I did the translation. It was my last quarter in the East Asian Languages Department at Berkeley. I asked my chief professor, Dr. Chen, are there any Buddhist poets I could work on? And he said, oh, I know just the person for you, Cold Mountain, Han Shan. I moved to an abandoned cabin in Marin County for the spring and shared it with the novelist Jack Kerouac. And of course, Jack being Jack, he loved the idea of Han Shan. And so did many other feckless youth of the time. I can't stand these bird songs. Now I'll go rest in my straw shack. The cherry flowers out, scarlet. The willow shoots up, feathery. Morning sun drives over the blue peaks. I put myself into it deeply while meditating. Oh, that smells like sage. To make it happen in my mind, to smell it and feel it, and to sit with it to the point where I felt I had gotten to where the poet had gone, and then try to write it in my own language. I only translated 24 of them. A far more thorough set of translations are those of Dr. Burton Watson, who did his, as far as I know, after I did mine, and then I read them with great pleasure.
I was living in Japan. The Japanese were beginning to take an interest again in Chinese literature. And I was doing translation and editing work. So I went to a Kyoto bookstore and I bought an old Japanese copy. Woodblock printing. 1756 is the date.
Wow.
Han Shan became far more famous in Japan than he was in China.
The Japanese Buddhists took up Han Shan in a way that the Chinese hadn't.
And made into a serious Zen figure.
Have I a body or have I none? Am I who I am or am I not? Pondering these questions, I sit leaning against the cliff while the years go by, till the green grass grows between my feet and the red dust settles on my head. And the men of the world, thinking me dead, come with offerings of wine and fruit to lay by my corpse.
Watch your step. Almost there. When I was living at a monastery in Taiwan, there were more pilgrims behind us. The abbot published an edition of Cold Mountain's poems in Chinese, the whole poems. This is Cold Mountain Cave. It's the butterfly woman. She's still here. So, right in the monastery I moved into, there was Cold Mountain waiting for me, and so I started working on his poems. You hear the bats? There's probably been people living here just like Cold Mountain did. You know, that's the hermit tradition.
He looked like a tramp. His body and face were old and beat, yet in every word he breathed was a meaning, in line with the subtle principles of things, if only you thought of it deeply.
This must be a statue of Cold Mountain. No matter how disreputable you are, when you die, you always get kicked upstairs. They've even, on the backside of the incense burner, they've called this Cold Cliff Temple. So in the local villagers' minds, this is a Buddhist temple.
His hat was made of birch bark. His clothes were ragged and worn out. His shoes were wood. Thus, men who have made it hide their tracks.
And so these are the statues of Cold Mountain, Pickup, and Big Stick. Big Stick was a monk. Pickup lived in a monastery in the kitchen, so both would have probably had their heads shaved. Whereas Cold Mountain lived outside the pale and only visited. So using that, this should be Cold Mountain here.
Sometimes intractable, sometimes agreeable, his nature was happy of itself. But how could a person without wisdom recognize him? That's almost a generic description of a Chinese hermit.
Yes.
Usually they're so refined. If Cold Mountain were here today, he would laugh himself to death. Why? Because Cold Mountain loved to laugh. And no matter how they depicted him, he would have found a way, reason to laugh.
重言我不惧，鸟道绝人迹。听寄何所有？白云报忧时。住此凡几年，屡见春冬意。寄语钟鼎家，虚名定无疑。
出生30年，长游千万里，新疆青草河， Ru Sai Hong Chan Chi. Born 30 years ago, I've traveled countless miles along rivers where the green rushes swayed, to the frontier where the red dust swirled. Lin Yao Kong Qiu Xian. I've made elixirs and tried to become immortal. Du Shu Jian Yong Shi. I've read the classics and written odes. Jin Gui Han Shan. And now I've retired to Cold Mountain. Chun Liu Jian Si Er. To lie in a stream and wash out my ears.
Great line. It's a great line. It's been quoted a lot later. That sleep by the creek and purify my ears.
In his own poems, there's clear evidence he had a family, tried to make it in the capital, regrets not being in the capital sometimes, you know, where the action is, working on politics, working as a bureaucrat.
The term boiling red dust is a common trope for the dusty, dirty turmoil and chaos and moral corruption of cities.
So many of the great Chinese poets, they all had a tension, and Han Shan has this as well, between being in the world and being away from the world.
So today I'm back at Cold Mountain would be like, I've given up trying to be a Taoist alchemist. I've gone back to my Buddhist practice, which accepts impermanence and looks at the shortness of life in a different way. That's back at Cold Mountain.
The birds in their chatter overwhelm me with feeling. At times like this, I lie down in my thatched hut.
As the busy Sunday people world recede at Guoxing Temple, cicadas come up to greet us.
Cherries shine with crimson fire. Willows trail their slender boughs. Whoever thought I would leave the dusty world and come bounding up the southern slope of Cold Mountain?
You know that Chinese character for cicada is a character Zen with a bug next to it. These are Zen bugs.
There's a naked bug at Cold Mountain with a white body and a black head. His hand holds 2 book scrolls, one the way and one its powers, the Tao Te Ching. His shack's got no pots or oven. He goes for a walk with his shirt and pants askew, but he always carries the sword of wisdom. He means to cut down senseless craving.
驱马渡荒城，荒城动客情，高低旧质跌。大小古坟茔，自证孤蓬影，长宁拱木声。所接皆属古，先时更无名。
We're in Coal Mountain Cave. We're having lunch. It's being prepared for us by a laywoman, who I fondly call the butterfly woman, who lives here, has lived here for the last 5 or more years. I know nothing about her. She doesn't speak, nor does she write. But she smiles a lot.
Beautiful.
And I'm sure if Cold Mountain, in fact, if you visit any hermit in China, this is sort of the reception you generally receive. Nothing but everything they have.
When you find them.
When you find them. Well, here is to Coal Mountain Cave. Cheers. Cheers. And all the pilgrims who have come here.
Men ask the way to Cold Mountain. Cold Mountain, there's no through trail. In summer, ice doesn't melt. The rising sun blurs in swirling fog. How did I make it? My heart's not the same as yours. If your heart was like mine, you'd get it and be right here. Number 22, a 4-line poem. On top of Cold Mountain, the lone round moon lights the whole clear cloudless sky. The full moon is the Buddhist symbol for full enlightenment.
From the commentaries are by Buddhist monks, Japanese monks, and they say, well, he couldn't really be unhappy because he's enlightened. Zen doesn't mean being happy all the time. It means being what you are at the time. If you're unhappy, be unhappy. And if you're happy, be happy. But don't cling to it.
I realized that Chen Shixiang had really put me onto a challenge, that he had given me something to really work on. Much more challenging for me than the ordinary Chinese great poet, even though they're very great and they're very, very hard to translate sometimes. This was more personal, because it touched on things I thought I should be trying to do in my own life and in my own practice.
One other thing about Han Shan and who he is and how he struck me immediately. He's very funny.
Do you have the poems of Han Shan in your house? They're better for you than sutra reading. Write them out and paste them on a screen where you can glance them over from time to time.
Once at Cold Mountain, troubles cease. No more tangled, hung up mind. I idly scribble poems on the rock cliff, taking whatever comes like a drifting boat.
I came once to sit on Cold Mountain and lingered here for 30 years. Yesterday I went to see relatives and friends. Over half had gone to the yellow spring. Bit by bit, life fades like a guttering lamp, passes on like a river that never rests. This morning I face my lonely shadow, and before I know it, tears come streaming down. Some of these I read when my father died. We had a little family ceremony of our own, and I read Han Shan.
He wasn't writing for the elite educated classes. He wasn't trying to impress people with his erudition by making all kinds of literary references and allusions like most Chinese poets did of the Tang Dynasty. He wrote to people's hearts, from his heart.
I would say I favor, the Han Shan version of Zen. But some people think Han Shan isn't upbeat or sustainedly upbeat enough. But that's what makes it interesting as poetry.
Well, this has been a great honor for us.
Poets are almost never discovered in their own lifetime. It always takes a good death or a good disappearance.
从这儿出来的，从那边进去，他就是把这样一坏，就生门开下来了，开下来之后他就进去了。
And people have revered him ever since.
One of the differences between China and Japan, between them, say, and the Occident, is they still enjoy the idea of poet eccentrics. And they can recognize them when they see them. And they won't make a fuss about a person like that when they're alive. But after they're dead, they'll admire them and publish their books and talk about them. But they'll wait till they die.
寒山有裸虫，身白而头黑。手把两卷书，一道将易得。住不安抚照，行不羁衣歌。常辞智慧见，拟破烦恼贼。